disastrous. These are the very same people who've gotten the United States into every pointless conflict, really since the Second World War. How many have we won? 0. And this makes the least sense of all if you view it through the prism that most Americans would, which is this good for us? No, obviously not. Now, one of the problems with changing that relationship is, well, you're going to have to deal with agents and advocates in the United States. And there are many of those. There are many of those. And by the way, just to be completely clear, they're not all Jewish. In fact, most of them aren't. This is not about Judaism. It's about blind support for a nation state called, to the extent that it harms our interests. And you saw that on full display in the last 24 hours. So the president excitedly announces a ceasefire, a pause in the fighting that cannot result in American victory, but only in further American defeat and degradation, and ultimately in bankruptcy and possibly in. So this is a great thing. Immediately, advocates for appear on Fox News telling you that this is not acceptable. This is a loss. This is cowardice. And it's extremely hard to control at this point, or once again, we would already. Take control of the oil. Oh, really? Hadn't thought of that. How would we do that? And of course, no one ever asks a follow-up question. How exactly would you do that? What would it cost us to do that? How long could we hold it? How far from mainland Iran is Karg Island? Is it within, artillery range? Have the Iranians thought this through too? Do they see Karg Island, through which 90% of their energy moves, as a key piece of real estate? Have they taken extraordinary steps to defend it? What are those steps? And how do we mitigate those? No, not a thought. Just take Karg Island, take control of the energy flows, collapse their economy. Well, then what happens? You collapse their economy, and then what? Does that open the Straits of Hormuz? Where does that leave us? Where does that leave the 7 countries that face Iran? No thought to that at all. Just do it. And by the way, it's kind of cowardly not to do it. They're children. And not only they're children, we know they are because they have a decades-long track record of bad decisions. Not just bad, but disastrous. These are the very same people who've gotten the United States into every pointless conflict, really since the Second World War. How many have we won? 0. Just a fact. A fact that you admit with sadness if you love the United States, as most of us do. None of this has worked. And if it has, tell us how. Just explain what the United States got out of any of these conflicts. With accelerating absurdity, each one more absurd than the next. You can understand you don't want China to control South Korea. Okay, let's do the Incheon landing. You could sort of understand why you wouldn't want Ho Chi Minh sweeping into Saigon, which is now called Ho Chi Minh City. Couldn't you really understand why we invaded Iraq? Not at all. And this makes the least sense of all if you view it through the prism that most Americans would, which is this good for us? No, obviously not. And there's no way to achieve it. And you know there's no way to achieve a military victory, meaning a return to the status quo of February 27th, because they never explain what those means might be. Because they have no idea, because they're children. And so really it's incumbent on the rest of us to increase our self-respect and stop giving airtime or any attention at all to people with a long proven track record of failure and absurdity and silliness. Listening to 83-year-old generals who couldn't find Karg Island on a map, pretending that they're experts on the subject. Because they're not. And again, they've gotten it wrong again and again and again. Would you take real estate advice from a homeless person? No. Because they're not good at real estate, so they're homeless. Like, this is nuts. And so for this government to function, people who've gotten it wrong again and again and again cannot persist in positions of leadership. Doesn't mean they have to be imprisoned. They'd like to imprison their enemies, but in a free country, you don't imprison people because of disagreement. They're saying out loud, anyone who disagrees with us should be in jail because they're authoritarians. But it means not allowing them in government. Why? Because they don't have the best interests of the country at heart. That's why. Obviously. Or they wouldn't be calling for military action that is by definition fruitless and Sisyphean. It doesn't work. Who does that help? Not us. Helps. That's the whole point of the program. Why do they still have positions of authority in the US government? Well, that's a really interesting question. But we could start, the great sorting could begin by disqualifying anyone from government service who holds a second passport. That's really simple. And not just a passport, but a Belgian passport, a Sierra Leonean passport, any other passport. If you're a citizen of another country, obviously you shouldn't be running our country because you have, by definition, dual loyalty. You can just leave and go to your other nation. No normal country would allow that. Why would you allow that? Doesn't mean people with dual citizenship can't live here, though there's an argument for that too. A strong argument for that. Pick a country. If you don't like it, leave. That's fair. You can't use this as a place to park your money, a place to hide out or hang out until you get in trouble and then flee to your other country. Like, why would any nation allow that? Most don't. We do. We got to stop it. But you could begin with, no, you can't serve in government if you've got 2 passports. Sorry, period, at any level. DMV up to DOD, no. And if you've served in a foreign military, come on now. Especially when the U.S. is out. You can't serve in the U.S. government if you've worn a foreign uniform. Of course not. You can't hold elective office if you fought for somebody else's country. Because by definition, you have fought for aims that are not the same as ours. In fact, they may be in opposition to ours. You may have fought against what's good for the United States. Certainly, if you served in the IDF, you fought against what's good for the United States, knowingly or not. You probably didn't mean to, but you did. You shouldn't go to jail for that. But you can't be allowed to work at, say, the Pentagon. But right now you can. And by the way, there are IDF officers working out of the Pentagon because they have an office within the Pentagon, as they do at CIA in Langley. A foreign government has offices in our critical executive branch headquarter buildings. That's just not healthy. That's crazy. And it cannot be allowed a single more day. Why would it? Oh, that's hateful. Of whom? Would it allow that? Would they allow Americans, I don't know, to open an office in the Dimona complex? No, because they're not insane, but we are. So we should stop that immediately. But the main problem with neocons, of all religions, just to be totally clear, is that not only are they not on board with the interests of the majority of our country, they work in opposition to those interests. Wars you don't need, mass migration into this country and the West, and that would include Canada and New Zealand and Australia, Western Europe and the United States. That migration, which I think even liberals would acknowledge has not been good for anybody. In fact, it's destroyed these countries because a sovereign country has control over its borders. Can't just change the population in a generation. Can't do that. That's all been abetted by the neocons, 100%. Now, why is that? Well, that's another question. But the whole thing is dark. The owner of OnlyFans is one of the biggest contributors to AIPAC? Tell me how that works. Don't know the answer, but it's not good. It's not healthy. It's not good for the United States. None of it's good. AIPAC's not good. OnlyFans is not good. So maybe it's not surprising there's some nexus there. But above all, what is degrading to our country, bad for our strategic objectives, and just rotten for the nation is the lying, the non-stop lying, the refusal to be straightforward about your aims. What are you actually arguing for? You never know. Because lying is totally acceptable among neocons, completely. You always cloak your real objective. You saw this in the 12-day war. Oh, no, we're just gonna get rid of their program because it's an imminent threat to the West. Okay, it's an imminent threat. And some people piped up and said, I don't know, this looks like the opening salvos in a regime change. Oh, shut up, racist. Of course, it turned out to be. But nobody ever apologized. Well, yeah, actually, you're right. You caught us the first time, and now we know because we're in a regime change or an attempted regime change. No, just keep lying. Just say whatever it takes, whatever's expedient to get to whatever the goal is, but you never know what the goal is because they'll never tell you.